of issues in that script, in that address. I had an opportunity to read it earlier this afternoon, and we'll get to touch on some of the points, hopefully.
Okay.
The audience might ask a few questions then as well. But first, can I just ask you, that there's an assumption built into the remarks about the continued role of a public broadcaster in the Irish media landscape. But given audience choice, the array of content, the different sources, outlets, do we really still need RTE as it's currently constituted?
Well, I think in terms of that, RTE has gone through massive periods of change. I think the people to ask about that are the licence fee payers who are funding more than 50% of it. And RTE continues, and our RTE is far from being a perfect organisation, and I consistently say that. Perfection is not a virtue I've ever claimed for RTE. But RTE continues to have a 96% reach. Like part of the justification for us of asking people, particularly in very difficult circumstances, to pay a licence fee, is that we give as much of that audience something they want, that as much of that audience is accessing it. But like the idea that RTE is static, RTE has just gone through and will continue to, as every media organisation has, not just RTE, will continue to go through dramatic change. But for me, the answer is what does the public trust RTE? Does the public like paying the licence fee? Of course, a lot of people don't like paying a licence fee, particularly since they have to. But it's, do they trust? Are they still accessing our services? And again, we saw that over the Easter commemorations, when it was the scale of RTE that allowed us cover so much. It was the scale of us being involved in different mediums that allowed us have the kind of impact that we had. And it wasn't all about RTE by the longest stretch. The 2016 committee, the newspapers, I thought were fantastic around it, commercial radio. But like RTE had a massively significant national impact, which I think has been accepted because of the scale and because of that. But it is RTE has changed dramatically and will continue to change. RTE is a smaller organisation than it was. RTE is, I hope, a more efficient organisation than it was. And it is also facing the same digital challenges that others are.
We'll come back and talk about the licence fee in a moment. I was interested in the fact that the first companies you mentioned beyond RTE were Facebook and Twitter. When you last spoke here back in 2011, you said that the future of broadcasting, and I quote, was going online. There's been a lot of change since then, online, mobile. Sketch out for us what that actually means on a day-to-day level for RTE.
There's people here from print newspapers as well, and we've all been caught in that dilemma that, our audiences are moving into a digital space. We're still making most of our revenue in our traditional output areas. So I think, what we have tried to do in terms of RTE, because it's quite obvious that audience patterns are shifting. I quoted some of the figures. Audiences are accessing things in different ways. Mobile is growing, particularly. But television and radio remain strong. And that's just a really important point for us to make, that television and radio consumption in this country, like if you look at the figures, if you add up the JNLR figures in terms of what commercial radio is doing, what national commercial radio is doing, what RTE is doing, I think the strategy we've tried to stay at a pace with the audience. We broke up the old digital division, we moved it out into the areas, we pushed through a digital newsroom, we've tried to get the best bang for our buck in that digital space out of the content we're providing. We've also looked in terms of the player. We're going to have a new player this year. A tipping point comes where, only people who know their own business and know the finances and the spread of expenditure within that can call when that tipping point is. But a tipping point comes when you decide you're going to shift a large slice of production monies from the traditional media into a digital space, digital-only content. We haven't reached there to a significant degree, and we made that call because of broadband penetration, because of a whole range of different things. We just felt it was too early. But what we have done is we've massively expanded the range of content, and we are still generating new content for that area, and we're doing it more. But I feel we're all going to hit in the years ahead a kind of a tipping point when that call is going to have to be made, and that's a very big call for any of us to make. And I think a lot of that is going to be contingent on what happens with national broadband plans. So
just to cut across you there, I'll boom my voice just for a second. You hold onto the mic. No BBC Three move in the short term.
We are looking at IPTV. You know, we are looking at it. It's quite inevitable that that's going to be a future. We have, you know, we've been working on proposals. It will be for the next person to decide whether we move ahead with them. So we're staying across that because we believe, and I believe, that we are going to have to be in that space. It's just, you look at the BBC Three move, and you know, BBC are trumpeting that the drama they released on BBC Three last week online got the same audience as it had done, and I think if that continues, that's a huge achievement. The difference for us and them and Irish media content providers is they've got €8 billion in income. They don't care whether they can monetize that BBC Three audience. So, and I'm not criticizing them. They put out a huge press release saying, just 2 days ago, saying we got the same audience. BBC Three is working. I think we have to hold off and see if it's working. But it's, if you're us or the Irish Times or any other broadcaster, you're adding in a different equation, which is I may get the same audience, but am I going to monetize it? And how much cheaper is it going to be because I've put it on BBC Three? And the BBC, which is, you know, it's not a criticism, they're a fantastic, amazing organisation. €8 billion a year income allows you to do those kinds of things. So I'm not saying we are looking at the IPTV space. We're moving, everyone is moving in that direction. We will have plans ready. We're not going to be foolish about it. We're not going to spend a shed load of money and then find, oh, well, that didn't work, sorry. But that tipping point is coming. Just that tipping point as broadband increases, as some of these other catch-up figures, as the non-live viewing increases more and more, that crunch decision point. Because right now, you know, I see Kevin O'Sullivan from the Irish Times over there. Like, we're all riding two horses here, and one of them is earning a lot more money for us than the other, but we desperately need to stay on both. And, you know, that is not sustainable for any of us in the long term.
Just in terms of sort of audience, and the figures you mentioned for Fair City, I thought were quite dramatic in terms of effectively a 2-to-1 in terms of live versus player and repeats. The tsunami that hit the newspaper industry from the late 1990s onwards, is that about to hit television? Because you were very strong in terms of television is still the dominant player, but audiences are breaking away from fixed schedules. So that makes it much harder to have channel loyalty. So somebody of my age might have loyalty to RTE, but somebody 20 years younger, it's YouTube, it's the snippets, it's going into the player. How does a small broadcaster like RTE in the global context deal with that issue about channel loyalty?
I think we have, you know, once you have Radio 1 and RTE 1 in the positions that they are, then, you know, you cannot say that channel loyalty is gone. It's similarly, once you have some of the other media brands in Ireland, they're really strong brands. People have an association with them. They're crown jewels. You know, I think if those figures started slipping dramatically and people were moving away from that, then I would be saying to you that channel loyalty is dead. But channel loyalty is not the same as it was. It's not even remotely the same. You know, and again, we talk, and you know, I constantly, because we talk so much about this, and sometimes it becomes a negative conversation, and it shouldn't be. You know, like if you take, I don't know, take James Corden in America, like his show is watched by 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 million people. It makes money. His Adele Carpool Karaoke was watched by 96 million so far and growing. So that there has to be, like, that can't be a negative, you know. It's like, it can't be that if 96 million people are watching Adele with James Corden, and his show is still making money, despite, I'm sure, and I hope they're paying him a shed load of money, then, you know, so there are opportunities here. We're still in the two-horse phase of where we are, and I think the trick and what we and for me, if you ask me what has been the most difficult thing about the last 5 years, it has been in the middle of the financial stuff, in the middle of the editorial stuff. It has been trying to keep pace with that and push that so that we don't solve all the other bits and then find, oh God, we're 3 years behind on all this.
I'm not going to get into specific programming. Just that example in terms of ratings, right? You have a legal obligation to inform, to educate, to entertain. You know, we saw controversy about a program in relation to crime recently in a prime peak time slot. Where does the balance between informing, educating and entertaining lie for RTE, given your dual-funded model?
You know, I could give you a history of the amount and attempts to define public service broadcasting over the years. You know, you go back to 1924, Lord Reith wrote a book which kind of summarised the similar inform, entertain and educate. He also said that public service broadcasting shouldn't be hurtful, you know, which kind of puts the context of the time. The inform, educate, entertain kind of lasted longer. We had the Forum of Broadcasting in 2002, which said, let's move away from definitions, let's look at goals, and it set goals for public service broadcasting. The Broadcasting Act is much more specific. It just talks about Irish language services, orchestras, which people forget is a legal obligation in the Broadcasting Act. And we've had other I tend to look on this thing, you know, my own perspective on it is universality, quality, diversity of programming. I believe that we need that sense of education, informing, entertainment. But for me, and I've always said this, we have to be offering something that the commercial sector doesn't. If we don't, then why are we getting the license fee? And that has to be an underpinning of what we do. And that doesn't mean that everything we do, and we've had loads of challenges at EU around this, it doesn't mean that everything we do has to be what the commercial sector doesn't do, because then you're into market failure. And the very people who are complaining about the price of the license fee now will be saying, why are we paying this license fee when nobody even bothers to watch you? You know, so it isn't a market failure, but there has to be strong elements of what we do that nobody else provides.
You mentioned the license fee. Your words were very strong in relation to the license fee. But tell me, do I understand by your comments, are you calling for the ultimate decision on the license fee to be taken out of the political domain?
What I'm calling for is...
That's what I understood from what you said.
What I'm calling for is, and you know, RTE is in a unique position. If another company has its funding entirely decided through the political process, they have an entirely different relationship with the political process to what we do. You know, it's unique because we are obliged to question. We are obliged to challenge. We don't always get it right. Sometimes we go too easy. Sometimes we go too hard. Again, I'm not here.
But my question, who determines the license fee?
For me, the BAI has to have a much stronger role, independent role in terms of defining funding for the license fee. They have to have. The system cannot work if a body politic, and I'm not even having a pop at the political process here, because it's almost human nature. And it has happened elsewhere as well. You know, it has happened in the BBC, it has happened in European countries. The BBC have had their worst hits in funding after general elections. The decision making has to be done independently. And without that, we are constantly going to run into this political battle where we cannot get past this morning's Morning Ireland interview. You know, you're trying to have policy and strategy discussions, and it's coming back, understandably, to those kinds of issues. And for me, we're never going to move forward unless we solve that.
Well, I suppose that's not going to be your problem for much longer. Okay, let me turn to the audience. We'll take a number of questions. Could I ask you to keep it to questions as opposed to speeches or contributions? So maybe tight focus questions. If you could give your name, and if you represent an organisation, you might indicate that as well, please. So if I can see a hand or two. All right, gentlemen there. Are we on microphone? Are we? Shout, please.
Shout, I think.
I'm a DCU student, I'm about to finish up now, and I'm just wondering, among peers, it's very easy to talk about RTE, especially after class, and you spoke about buying in content from Sky, the likes of that, and it kind of makes you wonder is there more room for, like you said, if you got more funding, 50% eventually go to independence, is there more room for less citizens? You know what I mean? Before RTE broadcast Dallas, and it was opening up the world to Ireland, but now it's not the case. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Facebook and Twitter, like you said, are
Yeah, like the proliferation of acquired programming in RTE is a direct correlation. You can always tell how much money RTE has by how much acquired programming it has. Like when I was growing up, we had Starsky and Hutch in peak. We had Porridge in peak. We had EastEnders. We had, you mentioned one there. We had Knight Rider. We had Magnum. People forget, like if people talk about the RTE shelters now, I did an exercise and I went back through the RTE guides from 30 years ago, and you should have, it's worth doing. Just the proliferation. We decided, and particularly when advertising revenue increased in the mid-2000s, when we had money, we moved all of those acquired programming. Like acquired programming is the absolute sunset industry for broadcasters, because it's just proliferation everywhere. You can sit down and you can watch Friends channels effectively. You can watch Simpsons. So, but it is dirt cheap. And it for me, I would love to see very little acquired programming on RT. There are some really, and that's acquired programming is brilliant. What HBO and what the American broadcasters are producing is just, and Netflix are producing and buying in is just top class. But you get it elsewhere. And for me, I would like to see us move away from as much of that as possible, but it is purely financial. Now, we're trying things. We're putting in a show on a Wednesday night with Brendan O'Connor, which has traditionally been the RTE movie slot. So we are trying things ourselves in terms of that. And with funding, you will see, you will see much more of that.
John Purcell, Independent Broadcasters Ireland. Thanks, Noel. I enjoyed that, and thank you for your term as Director General. On behalf of the Independent Broadcasters, we welcome your concern for the broader view. I don't want to give a speech of tribute, but please take it as read. We share many of your concerns about Irish content, and also many of the frustrations of RTE in relation to speed of policy making over the last few years. I suppose if I was to put it into a question, it would be two parts, and I think it's implicit in what you've said, but I'd just like to hear your thoughts on it. Do you recognise that public service broadcasting can be done on other channels other than RTE? And number two, if you were the Minister for Broadcasting in this new era of government that we're about to face into when you are available, when you move on to RTE, what would you do in relation to the licensing?
Well, in terms of the first question, there's images of RTE that we all live in Dublin 4 or in penthouses outside of the Donnybrook premises. I live in Monaghan. My kids go to school in Monaghan. I know what local commercial radio delivers. And I've never had a hesitation in saying that RTE is not the only organisation in Ireland that does public service broadcasting. It is a particular national organisation that has a particular remit, set of commitments, questioned every year, all of that, and for me it is a vitally important national facility for that, but I've always said that. In terms of the minister, I think a new minister coming in, and let's talk in the ideal world, has a huge opportunity, because everyone is feeling this. The newspapers are feeling this. We don't want Ireland to become Scotland. Commercial radio is feeling it. RTE is feeling it. Independent producers, people talk about the tough time in RTE. Independent producers have had a really tough time. And you know, it is not from a want for us to spend more in the independent sector. I can just guarantee you that. And I actually think there is genuinely an opportunity. And some of these things, retransmission fees, access to databases, license fee reform, tender the license fee, a whole range of different things aren't even in the politically toxic category. I'm not saying they're politically straightforward, but they're not even in the politically toxic. And I think there's an opportunity for a new minister to come in, grab hold of, I want to develop the Irish content sector, and what can I do? You know, and I think that is a real opportunity, and I believe that they will get massive engagement from the film sector, from Screen Producers Ireland, from yourselves, from us, and from newspapers. And if they say, in 10 or 20 years, you just look at the changes in ownership in broadcasting in this country in the last 5 years, forget about 10 years, the range of multinationals that are now owning hugely important and significant broadcasters. And where are we going? Are we going to be Scotland in the newspaper industry in 10 years? Is RTE just going to become decline, and become irrelevant? You know, and I believe there's an opportunity. I actually think there is an opportunity, and whatever else I am, I'm not naive, and I'm certainly not naive politically. And there are wins here. There are things that can get money that can be redistributed wherever, and that's a separate discussion, wherever, without going into some of the massive toxicity.
Frank, just briefly now, please, because we are time. Thank you.
Noel, you talked about getting the investment into digital and the challenges of making digital pay. Can you imagine how difficult it is for those of us in newspaper land, and indeed in my own case, Frank Moran at the media group in local newspaper land, where you were trying to build a digital platform, increasingly in competition with RTE, and particularly the imminent move of RTE into local news, and a subsidiary to that. What do you think of the BBC impending model in terms of co-funding with local newspapers in the UK to cover courts, that type of area?
I'm going to stack up a couple of questions. Thanks, Frank. Lady here.
My name is Laura Scapella. I work for a little newspaper as well called Dublin Wire. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the progress that's been made in the last 5 years in bringing in ethnic minority voices and ethnic minority presenters, or what the challenges you've sort of come across.
Okay, thank you. And just one more note. Sorry, gentleman here.
Yeah, Gimmer Peavoy. I was wondering whether you have any takers or backers in the political sphere for your ideas about altering the regulatory system and funding for RTE, and whether you feel that in this current political context, with a different kind of composition of Noel and a different distribution of power, whether you might find a much better reception in the House of Government.
I'm going to finish you there, because we are just one question, if that's okay. I'm going to let him come back on the three questions. First issue, the value of local producers, local news, co-funding.
Yeah, I absolutely see the value of that. You know, like the reaction to the BBC move has been interesting, and a lot, as you know, I'm sure, a lot of the regional newspapers are very sceptical about it. They see it as an inverse takeover. They're worried about it. There's been a lot of debate around it, and some reaction about it. Like when a few years ago, I said we would offer RTE content to the newspapers, which we did for the first time. I come from print, that's my background, so, and I've always maintained a huge interest in it. I wanted to go, and I'll be frank, I wanted to go one step forward with that and offer some unbranded content free. We ran into legal difficulties in terms of, if we made it available to newspapers, would we have to make it available to every blog? Would we have to, and then you've got unbranded RTE content out there in a space that you've very little control on. I wouldn't give up on that, and you know, I think there are other things that we could do in terms of cooperation, and I think RTE is more open than people think, and I think we would have done the unbranded content had we not run into those legal difficulties, which are still trying to be sorted out. So I absolutely understand the pressure that you're under. I think there are more things we could do together. I'm not sure, maybe the BBC model might give us something, but so far I've seen very mixed views around that, and I think you'd want to see whether at the end of a year or two, people think that they've effectively been taken over. There's also, a sense of getting different voices out there, and if the big BBC or RTE comes in with their voice and starts distributing it, what does that mean? So
Just that different voices then, ethnic voices?
yeah, like we've got a new diversity strategy, which I was really hoping would be done before I leave, because it's something I believe passionately in. It won't be, because it's better to get it right than have me standing there announcing it. So it'll be longer. I think we've made strides in terms of women on air. Strides, and I think the report that Jane Souter did. Yeah. Well, I'm talking about diversity, and I'll come to the ethnic minorities. Don't worry. I think we've made strides. A number of years ago, we had virtually no female presenters on 2FM. We have fallen down on ethnic minorities. Absolutely, we have not done enough. It's been difficult. It is an area that we have fallen down on. And it is an area that it's complicated. It's been complicated, and in terms of looking at that, what I would say to you, and I'm recognizing that publicly, and I'm recognizing publicly that part of the reason for doing what we're doing is that will change. And I think, for what it is worth, there is a big acceptance in RTE and a push in RTE to change that. And I think the publication of the strategy over the next number of months will be an important step in that.
Do you think? Can I just come in on that, just on the gender issue? Your successor has been announced, Dee Forbes from the Discovery Channel. She's the first woman DG. She'll be on the executive board, which you chair at the moment. 9 members of that executive board. Currently, only 2 of them are women, so there'll be 3 of the 9 women. Like, does that tell us something in terms of, is there still a glass ceiling in RTE?
I think, in RTE and other organisations, but I'll talk for RTE, we do not have enough women at a senior level. We don't. And that is a complicated issue. We have, at certain mid-levels, we have incredibly talented and large numbers of. We don't have. We will now have a woman chair. We will have a woman director general and 2 other members. We did have 3 members of the executive board and 1 person left. So again, this is something we're all addressing. It's not just us. It's not just RTE. Like, in fact, if you actually look around some areas in RTE, we're doing substantially better than others. But there's no point me defending something that I think is not as it should be. And I think that is not going to be changed overnight. We have made, and again, I would thank Jane Souter in terms of the report she did on Women on Air, where she recognised the strides we've made. And we made those strides because we just said, no, we're just going to change this. And we did change it. And I think similarly in terms of senior positions and senior management positions, that is something that the starting point is to recognise the issue. The next thing is to not just say, well, what can we do about it? It's to put a strategy in place. And the third thing is to be pretty bloody ruthless about implementing it. So I think we've recognised that, and I think we are better than other organisations, but it is particularly on us a responsibility.
That final question in relation to the regulatory environment, and maybe turned around in terms of, is the Broadcast Act of 2009, is it still fit for purpose?
I think there is an awful lot of positives in the Broadcast Act. There are changes, there are simple changes, and we've had a really good engagement with the department on these changes in terms of trying to get our points across, and in terms of the officials, they will require political sign-off. And, but around areas like retransmission fees, around areas like databases, all of that. The big one is going to be, you either start listening to independent recommendations politically, you start listening to those, or you just say, you know what, folks, everyone is wasting their time, you're undermining the process, we're all spending money on consultants, we are spending huge amounts of man and woman hours putting these reports together, and it's disconcerting for everyone if at the end of it nothing happens. And I think that is the most significant change, is a sense of, and you don't even need to change it. Like if you say, we're actually going to observe this now, we're actually going to stick with this, you know. But I would say we've had a very positive engagement with the department in terms of these changes.
I'm going to avail of my opportunity as chair, just a couple of quick questions and short answers. Best day as DG?
Best day as DG. Best day as DG was probably the bank holiday Monday at the end of the Easter, just looking back on the coverage. Looking back for me, I suppose, in terms of where we were 4 or 5 years ago, which was absolutely self-inflicted, but it's where we were, and we were in a hole, and people were rattled, and confidence was shaken, and you know, it was like, I'll never forget coming into work one day and a senior guy saying to me, "The ship is tilting, Noel, it's tilting." And I think for the organisation to kind of realise that, make the changes we made, and come back and produce that kind of output after a general election coverage, after the investigative work, was for me just incredibly satisfying.
Okay, and then sort of my former career as a journalist, a nosy question, but what are you going to do next?
I'm going to take some time, and I'm going to reintroduce myself to my 6 and 4-year-old who are kind of sometimes look at me like Mammy's brought a stranger home. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to take some time. Like, I'm going to, you know, I see myself staying in business. I have
in broadcasting.
Maybe not. But you know, like, there are things I want to do and things. But frankly, you know, these jobs are, and I am not complaining. I'm very well paid for what I do. It's a fantastic thing to do. It's been tough, as it has for a lot of different people. In many occasions, it's tougher for the people around you because you're just so bloody busy, you don't even notice it. But so I'm going to take a bit of time and, as I say, reintroduce myself, and then I probably see myself staying in that area.
Okay, thank you very much.